think over the past few days, we've seen how desperate Rutendo is to get into terms with ZANU-PF. He has been clashing with a lot of ZANU-PF members ever since Tungwarara tried to intervene and silence him from specifically targeting Emerson Tambudzo Mnangagwa when his monies were not paid for what he claims was his PR work on sanctions. He goes to an extent of saying he was responsible for removing the sanctions in Zimbabwe, a claim that cannot be justified really. And it began with Nick Mangwana a day ago writing a lengthy statement about Rutendo Matinyarare, prompting Rutendo to respond. This is what Nick Mangwana said, and I will read all the statements on record. Greetings and welcome to your lovely channel, the Hlonipani Global News. If you are watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. So this is what Nick Mangwana wrote. He says, Rutendo, I wish you would stop writing on my post to promote what are ostensibly deluded positions. I'm not sure what's going on with you, but let's be clear, you did not remove sanctions. Here is a reality check for you. One, you did not mobilize the region to speak with one voice on sanctions against Zimbabwe. President Magufuli did, and that is why 25 October was set as the SADC Anti-Sanctions Day. I am not sure how you believe that you as a non-entity had more clout than Dr. Steko Mena, Lawrence Tex, the then SADC Executive Secretary, who from her highly influential position berated sanctions year in, year out. The regional position was enough to make the US consider its foreign policy on Zimbabwe. So Nick Mangwana somehow agrees that the sanctions were removed. There are no sanctions which, in essence, were removed. In my view at all. Two, every year the content spoke with one voice, and when President Macky Sall was EU chairperson, he never missed the opportunity to make Africa's position clear that sanctions against Zimbabwe were considered by 54 countries as sanctions against all of Africa. At every UNGA gathering, Africa spoke with this voice. These diplomatic breakthroughs had nothing to do with your lone voice in the wilderness, which did not even wrangle a bird. I have had the occasion to speak to US diplomats on this, and your name does not feature at all in their recalibration of foreign policy. The majority have no clue who you are. Three, unless you played a role in putting critical minerals in Zimbabwe and other African countries to make the US interested in them, then you had a role in the shifting US sanctions position on Zimbabwe. Remind me again how you awarded General Electric, an American company, and China's Power Construction Corp, Power China, the contract to build the Bobatoka George hydroelectric project, in spite of the sanctions. Oh, wait, you didn't. Five, tell us how, as a member of the Westminster Africa Business Group, met Dr. S.P. Moyo in London in July 2019 and began working as a back channel to the British government, lobbying them to change their position on Zimbabwe, because that position was disadvantaging British businesses. Oh, I forgot. You are not a member and were never involved. Six, remind us how in 2015 you contributed to the first significant easing of EU sanctions, which culminated in the EU extending 267 million, about 267 million US dollars and also pound in financial aid to the Zimbabwean government for the first time since sanctions were imposed in 2002. That was a massive milestone. What was your role in this again exactly? In February 2018, the EU reduced individual sanctions to just 7 individuals and 1 entity while suspending measures against 5 others. How did you achieve this again? In February 2020, the EU removed 2 individuals from the sanctions list and updated the listing rationale for Amai Grace Mugabe and former President Mugabe. How did you achieve this again? 9, as the usual review continued, in February 2021, the EU removed 1 individual and amended entries for 2. Do you care to advise us how you pulled that off? 10, in February 2022, another 3 individuals were removed from the EU list. From where I stand and from my own involvement, I remember a progressive scaling down of sanctions by the EU every February when they came up for review. But what was your part in it? Nothing. 11. Now let's move to April 2021. After a 22-year pause, how did you bring back the European Investment Bank with a 15 million credit line for caps? Come on, Mr. Sanctions Layer. Tell us. 12. Now, let's turn to US sanctions and the scaling down. Tell us how between 2014 and 2017 you managed to force the US to remove 49 listings from the sanctions list in 10 separate delisting actions. 13. And finally, on December 12, 2022, please tell us exactly how you managed to get 17 individuals delisted by the US. The evidence speaks for itself. The progressive delisting, diplomatic engagement, and regional solidarity were driven by states, regional bodies, and seasoned diplomats, not by you alone individual. So that is what Nick Mangwana said. And Rutendo had to respond very, very quickly. He says, Mangwana, you are out of your depth on the sanctions debate. With due respect, Permanent Secretary, your write-up on sanctions portrays your lack of knowledge of the subject matter, and it's no wonder why in October 2021 I had to be called to a sanctions debate hosted by SAIIA and Professor Brian Ramtopoulos to rescue your brother after he ran away from a debate on sanctions where he was being out debated by Hopewell and Dewa Mavinga because he didn't know the subject matter despite being a lawyer. Now, if your brother, who is a lawyer for ZANU-PF, had no clue on the issue, what are the chances that you know better than him about sanctions? You don't. Hence, if I ask you to name 1 sanction and the legal instrument used to implement it, you wouldn't. This is why you raise irrelevant arguments about the fight against sanctions, because you are clueless about the subject. Hence, people like you fail to fight them, and then you envy people like me who mastered sanctions and fought them successfully. For example, today you want to tell me about the anti-sanctions batches being lobbied for by Magufuli, then SADC chairman, conveniently forgetting that Magufuli only began to speak about sanctions at the August 29 SADC meeting, 2 years after I began making videos and writing articles on sanctions that got the CIO to ask me to come to Zimbabwe in January 2019. From there, I left them a document that asked them to get Zimbabweans and SADC to march. Hence, they lobbied SADC for a resolution in the August 2019 meeting chaired by Magufuli. Two, my videos on Zimbabwean sanctions were already going viral in 2018, and I was the only African with a website dedicated to writing about Zimbabwean sanctions to educate the whole region about sanctions on Zimbabwe. Till today, if you Google Zimbabwean sanctions, my interviews, social media videos, website, and articles constitute the single biggest body of work on Zimbabwean sanctions in the world. Three, my articles in 2018 defining sanctions on Zimbabwe began to demystify Zimbabwean sanctions and publicize them to SADC and the world. Yet, there had been no similar articles on the matter before. So, of course, Magufuli, as chair of SADC, would talk about sanctions on Zimbabwe because he had been lobbied by the Zimbabwean government because of my strategy and document given to Linus Mafumo during my visit to DG Moyo. Why was DG Moyo calling me to employ me to fight sanctions in the government? If the government rather was already doing the work. Five, I even remember complaining to you in August 2019 that SADC and Zimbabwe were using my logo to advertise the SADC marches because I had an anti-sanctions movement and logo before SADC had won. SADC anti-sanctions marches came out of my UWS campaign and strategy. Why would that be? Why would that be if the anti-sanctions marches began before me? Six, the fact is I launched an anti-sanctions campaign in 2018, and only after that do we see any other anti-sanctions program start in Zimbabwe or SADC. That is clear cause and effect. Seven, if I ask you to name just one sanction, you wouldn't because you don't know the subject. 8, in 2019, I also remember helping you to write a demarche letter to the US government for Sibusiso Moyo after disparaging statements by the US ambassador. 9, on the issue of the UN General Assembly, United Nations only began to take the issue of Zimbabwe sanctions seriously only when they sent the UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur to Zimbabwe in 2021. But what made the UN HRC send a special rapporteur to Zimbabwe in 2021 after 19 years of not paying attention to the issue? It was the campaign I started in 2018 that saw me write to the UN Human Rights Council in 2019, asking them to come and do a human rights impact assessment of sanctions in Zimbabwe. It also came on the backdrop of me personally filing a complaint via their website about human rights violations and persecutions. So you can see two men in ZANU-PF. All of them, they claimed, Nick Mangwana claiming his government played a pivotal role in removing sanctions in Zimbabwe. Equally so, and also saying the SADC as well as AU played a critical role, as well as officials who were working for these institutions at that particular period of time. Now, Rutendo, on the other side, he claims he gave the government the document where the strategy emanated to fight against the Zimbabwean sanctions. But are they removed? I think they are fooling each other, both if they claim the sanctions were removed, because the targeted sanctions are still in place against top officials in Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe has failed significantly to address issues of human rights. Of course, sanctions are hitting Zimbabweans hard, but it is not also certain that if they are removed, the corrupt regime of Emerson Tambutso Mnangagwa can improve the well-being of Zimbabweans, looking at the grand scale of looting that is currently taking place in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for watching us. If you are watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. You can financially support this channel by pressing the join button and be part of our members who are the heartbeat of this channel. You can equally do so by pressing the thanks button and send us stars. Okanqobo Mhlabane is signing off. Let me love and leave you. Let's meet on the other side of the live broadcast as I